Hey guys, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it, thanks. And also let me know where y'all are watching from and at what time. I'm curious. When I volunteered for the fire lookout at Silver Peak National Park, I was told it would be the simplest, most peaceful summer job imaginable. After all, I loved hiking and solitude. What could be better than spending 3 months on a mountaintop, watching the sunrise and sunset from my private tower? The ranger who interviewed me, a grizzled man named Carl, had chuckled when I'd enthusiastically agreed. "It ain't all pretty sunsets," he'd muttered vaguely, sliding a piece of paper across the scarred desk. "You'll want to memorize these, no exceptions." The paper was weathered, typed decades ago, laminated as if someone expected it to survive another few centuries. 12 rules were clearly listed, each oddly specific, each more baffling than the last. I skimmed it casually at first. 1. The trapdoor beneath the tower must be locked by 7 p.m. sharp and stay locked. Always. 2. Do not use binoculars after sunset. They see you back. 3. Do not eat anything that wasn't packed by you. And it continued in that vein, strange rules about lights, radios, lanterns, and spare chairs. I laughed softly, thinking it some hazing ritual meant for rookies. "Funny," I'd said lightly, looking up at Carl's stone-cold expression. My laughter died quickly. His eyes were deep-set, wary. "Ain't a joke, Sarah. Follow those exactly. You'll thank me later." He leaned closer, lowering his voice to an urgent growl. "You hear anything strange, see anything off, you don't break the rules. Ever." 2 days later, as I drove the narrow dirt road winding up Silver Peak, his words still haunted me. By the time I reached the lookout tower, a weather-beaten, spindly structure clinging to the mountaintop, I'd convinced myself Carl was simply eccentric. The view was spectacular, endless forest spreading out like an emerald carpet beneath jagged, snow-capped peaks. The tower itself, though creaky and rustic, was charming enough. The single room at the top featured a desk, a cot, a stove, and a large windowed observation deck encircling the cabin. Beneath my feet lay a trapdoor, old iron hinges rusted but sturdy. After unpacking my supplies, carefully selected meals, extra batteries, and plenty of coffee, I checked my watch. 6:57 p.m. Remembering the first rule, I squatted down and secured the heavy iron latch. It locked into place with a comforting thunk. Almost immediately, I felt the first subtle tremor vibrate up through the floorboards. I paused, heart suddenly beating faster. My imagination surely, just nerves. But the vibrations grew stronger, more insistent. Something beneath the tower was climbing the stairs rapidly. Pulse hammering, I stood frozen in place, staring at the locked trapdoor. The handle rattled violently once, then twice. Whatever was below slammed against it with startling force, making me stumble back with a shriek. My breath came in sharp gasps as I stared, wide-eyed and unbelieving. Another powerful thump rattled the trapdoor, this time accompanied by a low guttural growl. I scrambled away, gripping the edge of the desk, mind racing frantically. I glanced at the laminated paper lying innocently on the tabletop, remembering Carl's grim expression. These weren't hazing rules or jokes. This was a manual for survival. The assault on the trapdoor intensified, furious banging echoing like gunshots. Every blow sent shockwaves through the tower, rattling the windows. Terrified, I glanced outside but saw nothing beyond the gathering twilight. My watch ticked painfully slow. Minutes felt eternal. Then suddenly, as violently as it had begun, the pounding ceased. Silence enveloped the tower, oppressive and thick. I sat shivering, clutching my knees, too afraid to move, barely daring to breathe. Slowly night claimed the landscape beyond the windows, darkness swallowing the distant peaks and trees. With trembling hands, I lit the lantern as instructed by Rule 8. Keep one lantern lit at all times. Letting it go out invites them in. The pale yellow glow bathed the small space in false comfort. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. My initial terror gradually gave way to exhaustion. Was this some elaborate prank? Just as I began doubting my sanity, a movement caught my eye outside. A faint glow, shimmering and ethereal, hovering amongst distant trees. Tiny pinpricks of light like stars drifting low. Fascinated, I started toward the window, forgetting myself momentarily. Then rule number 5 flashed in my memory. If you see lights in the trees, turn off all electronics and lie flat for 10 minutes. Panic surged. I lunged for my radio and flashlight, switching them off hastily, plunging the tower into eerie semi-darkness, lit only by the frail lantern. Dropping flat to the cold floorboards, I lay perfectly still, heart pounding painfully. Outside, the lights drifted closer, weaving gracefully through the forest canopy toward the tower. My body trembled uncontrollably. Every nerve screamed for me to look, to peek out just once, but I resisted fiercely, eyes squeezed shut, reciting the rules silently like prayers. A presence pressed around the tower, invisible yet palpable. Something scraped lightly against the glass, testing, seeking entry. My heart thudded louder, threatening to burst from my chest. The air seemed thick, charged with malice and curiosity, a hungry intelligence circling my isolated refuge. 10 excruciating minutes crawled by like centuries. Eventually, the oppressive presence eased, the scraping ceased. The lights retreated reluctantly back to the shadowed forest. Only when absolute stillness returned did I dare to sit up, gasping for air, drenched in cold sweat. I sat shivering, holding the rule sheet like sacred scripture. Carl's words echoed with new clarity in my mind. You hear anything strange, see anything off, you don't break the rules. Ever. Outside, night cloaked Silver Peak National Park in darkness, hiding things that moved quietly through the trees, things aware of my presence, patiently waiting for my mistakes. It was then I realized surviving 3 months here wouldn't be about peaceful solitude. It would be about following the rules. Sleep did not come easily that first night. And when dawn finally cracked the eastern sky with shades of purple and gold, I felt relief wash over me. Exhaustion pressed on my eyelids, gritty and heavy, but anxiety kept me alert. I stood shakily and peered cautiously outside. Nothing appeared out of place. The trees swayed gently in the morning breeze, and birds chirped innocently, blissfully unaware of the horrors I'd faced overnight. Determined to regain some sense of normalcy, I brewed coffee on the old stove, gripping the warm cup as though it might anchor me back to reality. The coffee was bitter, scalding, and exactly what I needed. Sunlight poured through the windows, chasing away lingering shadows. For a brief moment, the strange events of the previous night seemed impossible, a trick played by fear and darkness. Yet as my gaze wandered around the tower, settling on the laminated sheet of rules again, my stomach tightened. Carefully, I read each rule once more, committing them to memory with renewed seriousness. This wasn't paranoia. This was survival. Routine set in quickly, logging weather conditions, scanning for smoke or fires, and checking in periodically via radio with headquarters. The static-filled conversations were brief and impersonal, which suited me fine. The fewer personal details shared, the better, I reminded myself, recalling rule number 6. Don't use your name over the radio, ever. Late morning passed quietly, a welcome lull that allowed me to recover slightly from the terrifying initiation. As noon approached, I stepped onto the observation deck, stretching my stiff muscles under the warm sun. The view, stunningly beautiful, momentarily soothed my frayed nerves. Silver Peak National Park stretched endlessly below, majestic and deceptively serene. Then I noticed movement, subtle at first, a dark shape slipping between the distant trees. My breath caught, and I instinctively reached for my binoculars, pausing only when the rules flashed vividly in my mind. Do not use binoculars after sunset. They see you back. The sun was still high, safe enough, I reasoned nervously. Through the binoculars, the distant figure became clearer, a person standing still at the edge of the forest, staring up at the tower. Their face was obscured by a hood, clothing dark and ragged. My heart hammered. As if sensing my scrutiny, the figure slowly lifted an arm, waving deliberately. Rule number 4 echoed, don't acknowledge any figure in the forest if it waves. My body froze in place, heart racing as I desperately fought the impulse to respond. The figure waved once more, slower, more exaggerated. A chill ran down my spine, my instincts screaming danger. Dropping the binoculars abruptly, I stepped back into the cabin, locking the door hastily behind me. My hands trembled as I clutched the table, breathing deeply to calm myself. The The figure stayed at the edge of the clearing for another half-hour, motionless. Eventually it turned and vanished into the dense trees, leaving me shaken and deeply unsettled. What were these beings, and why did they torment the lookout? As daylight waned, anxiety returned in force. By evening, I found myself checking the lock on the trapdoor multiple times, my heart leaping at every small creak or groan of the tower settling. At exactly 7 p.m., the trapdoor was locked once again, my hand shaking slightly as I secured it. Nightfall brought dread, but this time I was prepared. Lantern lit, electronics off, senses alert. I waited. Hours dragged on, filled only with the distant rustle of leaves and the mournful call of an owl. Just when I started believing tonight might pass quietly, the radio crackled to life. "Silver Peak Lookout, come in." The voice was friendly, familiar enough, yet I hesitated, uneasy. I keyed the microphone cautiously. "Look out here." "Routine check," the voice said cheerily. "Everything all right up there tonight?" "All clear," I replied tersely, careful to omit my name. "Good to hear, Sarah," the voice responded casually, sending an immediate jolt of terror through me. "Stay safe." I jerked away from the radio, heart racing wildly. How did they know my name? Headquarters never used personal names, strictly call signs and protocols. Fear surged as I stared at the silent radio, betrayal twisting inside me. Had something infiltrated even the safety of headquarters? That night I barely slept, too frightened to close my eyes for long. Each sound amplified my dread, each shadow twisted into something sinister. The lantern's flickering glow offered little reassurance. Morning arrived slowly, mercifully pushing away the nightmare-filled darkness. I knew now without doubt that Carl's warnings and the bizarre rules he'd given me weren't mere superstition. They were lifelines. Whatever inhabited Silver Peak thrived on fear and vulnerability. With trembling hands, I marked another day survived in my logbook. The tally felt fragile, insignificant against the looming threats, yet it represented my will to endure, to cling stubbornly to sanity and life, no matter what horrors awaited. And deep down, beneath the constant tension and lurking dread, I felt another emotion taking root: determination. I wouldn't become another forgotten victim in Silver Peak's long, shadowy history. Somehow I'd survive. I'd follow every rule, trust nothing and no one. This mountain wouldn't defeat me so easily. By the third day, a disturbing routine had taken hold. Daytime lulled me into a fragile sense of security, filled with mundane tasks like monitoring weather and radio checks, while nightfall brought dread. Every sunset was a countdown to whatever new horror awaited me. As the sun sank lower, casting long, ominous shadows over Silver Peak, I meticulously prepared for another harrowing night. The trapdoor was checked and triple-checked. The lantern was refilled and placed prominently in the center of the room, casting a protective halo of warm, flickering light. I paced anxiously, glancing repeatedly at my watch, dreading the arrival of darkness. At exactly 7 p.m., the latch on the trapdoor was securely locked once again. My pulse quickened, half expecting another violent assault from below, but silence prevailed, at least for the moment. Relief washed briefly over me, but I knew better than to lower my guard completely. The night deepened, wrapping the tower in thickening darkness. The forest outside was eerily silent, the usual nighttime noises strangely absent. I sat stiffly at the desk, eyes darting toward every faint movement, real or imagined, in the surrounding shadows. Each creak of the old tower seemed magnified, each gust of wind more sinister. Hours crawled by, slow and torturous, until sometime after midnight my weary eyes caught a faint, shimmering glow deep within the forest. At first I dismissed it as my exhausted mind playing tricks, but the glow steadily grew brighter, moving silently through the trees toward the tower. My heart seized as rule number 5 surged through my mind. If you see lights in the trees, turn off all electronics and lie flat for 10 minutes. Panic gripped me. I lunged toward my electronics, hastily switching them off. Darkness enveloped the tower except for the frail glow of the lantern. Quickly I dropped flat to the cold wooden floor, pressing my body as close to the boards as possible, hardly daring to breathe. Minutes passed, agonizingly slow, each second stretching painfully as the ethereal lights drew nearer, encircling the lookout. Their illumination cast unnatural shadows, weaving and shifting like restless spirits across the walls. Terror tightened my chest, my heartbeat deafening in my ears. Despite the overwhelming urge, I kept my gaze fixed firmly downward, eyes squeezed shut against temptation. Then I heard it, faint but unmistakable, a scratching sound against the outer walls, soft yet insistent. Every muscle in my body tensed, resisting the urge to spring up in panic. Something pressed close to the windows, probing, curious, seeking entry. Each passing second felt like torture, my mind spiraling with horrific possibilities. Suddenly, the scratching ceased, replaced by a chilling silence. The oppressive weight pressing upon the tower slowly receded, the lights retreating grudgingly back into the darkness of the trees. Still, I remained motionless, counting down the minutes until the rules permitted me to move. Finally, 10 excruciating minutes had passed. Shaking violently, I sat upright, gasping for air as the adrenaline faded. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I reached for the lantern, reassuring myself of its steady, comforting glow. Exhaustion hit me like a physical blow, but sleep seemed impossible. I spent the remainder of the night perched nervously in the chair, clutching the laminated rule sheet tightly. My eyes never left the windows, my body tense and ready, haunted by the knowledge that even a small lapse could prove fatal. When dawn finally broke, filtering weakly through thick clouds, relief washed over me, raw and overwhelming. Yet beneath the relief was a grim acknowledgement. This pattern would repeat nightly, each sunset bringing fresh torment, each sunrise merely a temporary reprieve. As I marked another day survived in the logbook, my handwriting shaky but determined, I understood with chilling clarity that survival at Silver Peak depended entirely on strict adherence to these bizarre, cruel rules. I had witnessed firsthand the consequences of wavering, however slight. And though fear still gnawed constantly at the edges of my sanity, beneath it grew something stronger. A fierce resolve. I refused to become another victim, forgotten and lost among Silver Peak's dark secrets. Whatever awaited me in the nights ahead, I would face it, armed with vigilance, determination, and the unwavering commitment to the rules that now defined my existence. The fourth day dawned gray and oppressive, clouds hanging low and heavy, blotting out the sun. It felt fitting, like the world itself mirrored the dread constantly gnawing at my heart. I spent the morning quietly repairing and reinforcing anything within the tower that seemed weak or compromised. Every nail hammered, every board secured, felt like another thin barrier between me and the unknown horrors lurking outside. My nerves were frayed and raw, every creak and groan of the aging structure sending my pulse racing. After a tense radio check-in, I retreated to the observation deck, hoping the crisp mountain air might clear my head. The sprawling forest stretched endlessly, its beauty now tainted by fear. Every shadow beneath the canopy seemed to hide something sinister. As my eyes scanned the horizon, movement caught my attention, a figure emerging from the forest's edge. I squinted, heart immediately accelerating. It was the same hooded figure from yesterday, standing still, staring directly at the tower. My stomach churned with unease. The figure raised an arm slowly, deliberately waving once again. My breath caught sharply, pulse pounding as I remembered Rule 4. Don't acknowledge any figure in the forest if it waves. I forced myself to remain motionless, gripping the railing until my knuckles turned white. The figure persisted, the slow, deliberate motion almost hypnotic in its attempt to lure my attention. A sudden rustle of leaves nearby startled me, my head snapping around instinctively. A second figure had emerged, equally shrouded and enigmatic, standing silently just within sight. My heart leapt to my throat. There were more of them. Panic surged through me. I stepped back hastily into the safety of the cabin, locking the door firmly behind me, my breath ragged and uneven. Inside, I paced nervously, every instinct screaming at me to flee, to escape the mounting threats closing in. But the rules were clear. Leaving prematurely was dangerous. I was trapped, compelled by necessity to endure each horrific encounter. Hours dragged by, my anxiety rising with each passing moment. I tried to distract myself by meticulously cleaning and organizing, desperate for some sense of control. But the image of those figures haunted my thoughts relentlessly. Who or what were they, and why were they so intent on drawing my attention? Evening approached far too quickly, shadows lengthening ominously across Silver Peak. By 6:50 p.m., my nerves were nearly shattered. Methodically, I moved through my nightly preparations, locking the trapdoor precisely at 7 p.m., refilling the lantern and extinguishing all unnecessary electronics. Darkness settled rapidly, deepening the silence around the tower. For a while, nothing disturbed the tense quiet, until soft footsteps broke through my heightened senses, approaching cautiously from below. Terror tightened my chest as the steps halted just beneath the tower, lingering ominously. My heartbeat echoed loudly in my ears, hands trembling as I clutched the laminated rule sheet, whispering silent reassurances to myself. "Don't look, don't respond," I repeated quietly, over and over. After an eternity, the footsteps retreated slowly, fading away into the forest. Relief flooded my shaking body, but I dared not relax completely. The night was still young, and danger was ever present. I spent the rest of the night in tense vigilance, listening carefully for any hint of movement or intrusion. Dawn felt impossibly distant, each second stretching unbearably as I struggled to maintain my sanity. Finally, the first faint rays of morning pushed back the oppressive darkness, easing my tension incrementally. I stumbled to the window, exhaustion and relief mingling in a dizzying rush. Another night survived, but how many more could I endure? As I logged yet another harrowing night, I felt both weaker and stronger simultaneously, exhausted yet defiant. I would endure this nightmare. I had no other choice. The fifth day felt endless, stretching onward without mercy. Every movement was sluggish, my body heavy with fatigue and constant vigilance. The morning tasks blurred into one monotonous rhythm, recording weather conditions, scanning for distant smoke, and performing perfunctory radio check-ins. My responses had become automatic, stripped of emotion or unnecessary detail. The less I said, the safer I felt. I took brief breaks on the observation deck, cautiously scanning the perimeter of the forest, wary of figures lurking just beyond my vision. Today, the woods were eerily quiet, devoid even of birdsong. It felt as though nature itself sensed the malevolence inhabiting Silver Peak and had chosen silence as a defense. By midday, restlessness overtook me. The tower, once a charming sanctuary, now felt increasingly claustrophobic, a prison rather than a refuge. Yet the outside world offered no comfort either. Every glance toward the forest reminded me of what lay hidden beneath the shadows, watching and waiting for a lapse in vigilance. Desperate to distract myself from spiraling anxiety, I busied myself with tidying up again, reorganizing supplies and checking inventories. It was mundane, but it grounded me in reality, reminding me of simpler times when the woods were places of solace rather than terror. As evening crept nearer, anxiety clawed at my chest once more. By now, preparations for nightfall had become grimly familiar. Locking the trapdoor at precisely 7 p.m., refilling and lighting the lantern, and carefully extinguishing all unnecessary electronics. These routines were both comforting and nerve-wracking, reminders of the ever-present danger. Darkness fell heavily, wrapping the tower in its cold, suffocating embrace. Time slowed, stretching painfully as I sat in rigid silence, straining my ears for any unusual sounds. Initially, the night seemed uneventful, deceptively calm, until the clock passed midnight. That was when the voices began. They started softly, barely audible over the wind rustling through trees, a distant, plaintive cry drifting on the breeze. My blood ran cold, remembering Rule 7 clearly. If you hear a voice calling for help after midnight, keep silent. "Help, please," the voice called again, clearer this time, unmistakably human. My hands shook as I clutched the edge of the desk, fighting the instinctual urge to rush to the window or respond. The voice persisted, increasingly desperate and urgent, piercing through the night air with terrifying clarity. "Is anyone there? I'm hurt. I need help." My body trembled uncontrollably, every instinct screaming at me to help the pleading voice. Yet I knew the rules were unyielding. Ignoring them would surely lead to doom. Still, guilt twisted sharply in my chest, a knife driven by compassion and fear. The voice continued relentlessly, each plea more desperate than the last. tugging cruelly at my conscience. Tears of frustration welled in my eyes as I clenched my jaw, resolutely silent. I fought to steady my breathing, silently repeating the rules, a fragile shield against the overwhelming urge to respond. Minutes crawled by, agonizingly slowly, stretching endlessly into torment. Just when I felt I couldn't endure another second, the cries abruptly ceased. The silence that followed was deafening, oppressive. My breath came in shallow, ragged gasps as I sagged against the desk, relief and sorrow warring within me. But respite was brief. Moments later, another sound replaced the pleading voice, a sinister laughter, cold and mocking, echoing faintly from the darkness outside. My spine stiffened instantly, fear tightening like a vice around my chest. This laughter carried no pretense of humanity, only malevolence and satisfaction at my torment. I sat frozen, heart hammering painfully in my chest as the laughter slowly faded into silence. The night returned to its quiet menace, shadows pressing thickly against the windows, seeming to watch and wait for another opportunity. Sleep was impossible now. Each moment felt charged with tension, every nerve alert to even the slightest sound. The remainder of the night passed in torturous vigilance, my exhausted mind replaying the voices repeatedly, torturing me with what-ifs and haunting uncertainties. Dawn finally broke, pale and weak, casting thin rays of hope through the gloomy clouds. I felt numb, drained of both fear and resolve. Mechanically, I rose to my feet, stumbling to the observation deck, desperate for fresh air to clear my head. Outside, Silver Peak stretched endlessly, the beauty of the landscape mocking my nightmarish existence. Yet even as exhaustion threatened to claim me entirely, determination flickered stubbornly within. I would survive no matter how relentless the horrors became. As I logged another day, my handwriting shaky but legible, I realized the brutal truth. Survival meant enduring repeated torments, endless tests of mental and emotional strength. Silver Peak demanded sacrifices, my comfort, my sleep, perhaps even my sanity. But surrendering wasn't an option. No matter how terrifying the nights grew or how seductive the calls for help became, I would hold on to the rules, cling desperately to them as lifelines. Each day endured was a victory, each sunrise proof of resilience. Yet deep inside, a troubling question lingered. How long could I truly withstand such relentless psychological warfare before my resolve finally shattered? The sixth morning dawned as pale and bleak as my spirits felt. The strain of constant vigilance and psychological torment was beginning to show, etched deeply into my reflection in the tiny mirror above the sink. Dark circles ringed my hollow eyes, and my skin had grown pallid from lack of proper sleep. Yet despite my visible exhaustion, an ember of defiance burned stubbornly within me, unwilling to surrender. After a sparse breakfast and the morning's routine checks, I climbed down carefully onto the observation deck, eager for fresh air and a momentary respite from the claustrophobic confines of the cabin. The cool breeze brushed my skin gently, the familiar scent of pine and earth a stark contrast to the horrors of the night before. Walking around the deck, my gaze fell upon something unusual, a neatly wrapped sandwich, placed carefully on the railing. My heart stopped cold, the blood draining from my face. Rule number 3 immediately echoed in my mind. Do not eat anything that wasn't packed by you. The sandwich was unsettling in its normalcy. It was wrapped neatly in white paper, the kind one might see in a quaint deli or cafe, yet its very presence screamed danger. Who or what had left it here, and how had they managed to place it without detection? Unease churned violently in my stomach. I approached slowly, cautiously, almost afraid the sandwich itself might leap at me. Peering closer, I noticed faint fingerprints along the edges of the wrapping, smudges of dirt and something darker, perhaps blood, staining the pristine white paper. A shudder ran through me as I stepped hastily back, my breath ragged. My gaze darted fearfully toward the dense tree line surrounding the tower. Had someone or something been watching me this closely? The implications were terrifying. The beings tormenting me weren't merely illusions conjured by fear and isolation. They were intelligent, calculating, and disturbingly close. Determined to remove the ominous offering from sight, I grabbed a stick lying nearby, using it gingerly to push the sandwich from the railing. It tumbled down, landing softly in the grass below. Instantly, a rustling from the bushes startled me. Something darted from the underbrush, snatching the sandwich away with frightening speed. My heart thundered painfully in my chest as I stumbled backward, nearly falling onto the deck. Whatever had taken the sandwich vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving only silence behind. A cold sweat prickled across my skin, my thoughts racing frantically. Clearly, my tormentors were closer and more tangible than I'd feared. The rules weren't just guidelines, they were a lifeline, a fragile shield protecting me from whatever horrors lurked just out of sight. Returning to the cabin, I bolted the door tightly, heart still racing erratically. Anxiety and paranoia pressed heavily upon me, suffocating and oppressive. Every sound, every shadow felt sinister and threatening. Afternoon crept slowly by, tension growing steadily as dusk approached. Routine preparations, locking the trapdoor at 7 p.m., lighting the lantern, extinguishing electronics, were performed mechanically, almost mindlessly. Each action reinforced the bleak reality of my existence. Survival depended entirely on meticulous adherence to these unnatural rules. Nightfall enveloped the tower swiftly, the darkness pressing closer, heavier than before. The wind howled mournfully around the tower, each gust seeming to carry with it whispered threats and cruel promises. The memory of the sandwich haunted me vividly, reminding me of my vulnerability. Hours dragged by in torturous suspense, nerves stretched thin, eyes straining into the darkness beyond the windows. My senses felt heightened, acutely aware of every faint sound and subtle movement. Midnight passed quietly this time, but peace remained elusive. Just after 2 o'clock, a subtle scratching sound disturbed the silence. My spine stiffened, heart hammering furiously in my chest. The sound was soft, persistent, something carefully testing the tower's perimeter, searching for weakness or entry. My muscles tensed painfully, every nerve screaming at me to remain still, silent. The scratching intensified, circling methodically around the base of the tower. Then abruptly it stopped. Silence pressed heavily, stretching unbearably. Minutes passed like hours, tension building relentlessly until finally faint footsteps receded into the forest, leaving me trembling uncontrollably with relief. Dawn brought little comfort, but the pale morning light was enough to ease the worst of my fear. Weak and exhausted, I staggered outside onto the deck once again, searching instinctively for any sign of intrusion. My eyes immediately found fresh scratch marks around the tower's base, deep grooves gouged aggressively into the wooden posts. My stomach churned violently, nausea rising sharply at the sight. These were not random marks, these were deliberate. A chilling reminder of the danger that had nearly breached my defenses. The entities tormenting me were real, tangible threats, capable of both subtle manipulation and overt aggression. Returning to the cabin, I sank heavily into the chair, dread gnawing relentlessly at my resolve. Each passing night felt increasingly perilous, the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurring dangerously. The rules offered scant reassurance, but they were all I had left. As I logged another harrowing night, determination surged stubbornly through my veins. Despite exhaustion, fear, and uncertainty, one truth remained unshakable. Surrender was not an option. I would cling fiercely to survival, following each rule meticulously no matter the cost. Yet deep within, a question lingered cruelly. How long before my tormentors found a way past the rules, rendering even my strict adherence meaningless? I shuddered at the thought, resolving instead to focus solely on the immediate future, one night at a time. By the 7th day, my isolation had become almost unbearable. The unending vigilance was draining me faster than I ever imagined possible. Sleep was sparse and fleeting, filled with unsettling dreams and half-remembered terrors. I moved through daily routines mechanically, actions hollow and automatic. Yet I clung desperately to these rituals. They were all that tethered me to sanity. The day passed slowly, my attention fixed constantly on the silent encircling forest. Even the ordinary tasks, logging weather conditions, radio checks, were charged with a constant dread. Every shadow seemed to shift and twitch, each subtle noise magnified 100-fold by paranoia. Evening approached once again, relentless and inevitable. Each sunset was now a grim countdown, a reminder of the lurking horrors waiting for nightfall. I methodically secured the trapdoor precisely at 7 p.m., then meticulously checked every lock and latch again, driven by obsessive caution. The lantern, my fragile shield against the encroaching darkness, was carefully refilled with fuel and placed prominently at the center of the room. Its comforting glow illuminated the small cabin, casting flickering shadows that danced uneasily across the walls. As full darkness enveloped Silver Peak, I took my seat at the desk, clutching the laminated rule sheet tightly. I knew better than to expect a quiet night. Danger was always imminent, lurking just outside my fragile refuge. Yet, as the hours ticked slowly by, a strange calm settled over the tower. It felt unnatural, unsettling in its deceptive serenity. Around midnight, exhaustion overwhelmed my vigilance, my eyelids heavy with fatigue. I struggled against sleep, knowing how dangerous even a brief lapse could be. But the warmth of the lantern's light and the deep, oppressive silence lulled me closer to unconsciousness. Suddenly, a subtle shift in lighting snapped me awake. My eyes flew open in panic as the lantern flickered erratically, its flame wavering dangerously low. My heart surged with terror. Rule 8 echoed urgently in my mind. Keep one lantern lit at all times. Letting it go out invites them in. Panic gripped me as I lunged toward the lantern, frantically adjusting the wick and adding fuel. My hands trembled violently, spilling fuel across the table. The flame sputtered weakly, threatening to die completely. Shadows deepened ominously around me, pressing closer with predatory eagerness. Just as the flame seemed destined to fail, it steadied suddenly, regaining its comforting brightness. Relief flooded my shaking body, leaving me weak and breathless. Yet, even as the immediate danger passed, my heartbeat refused to slow. Outside, something had changed. The forest was no longer silent. A low, insistent hum filled the air, a droning sound that crawled beneath my skin, raising goosebumps along my arms. Shapes moved just beyond the windows, vague and indistinct but unmistakably real. They circled slowly, methodically, watching intently for any opportunity to breach my defenses. I pressed back against the cabin wall, eyes wide with fear, my breath shallow and rapid. The lantern flickered again, its glow faltering momentarily. Instantly, the droning hum intensified, the circling shapes pressing closer, their shadows stretching grotesquely across the window panes. "Stay lit," I whispered desperately, pouring every ounce of focus into maintaining the flame. My trembling hands hovered near the lantern, ready to intervene at the slightest flicker. Time slowed to an agonizing crawl, each second stretching painfully. Slowly, the shapes outside began retreating, their sinister hum fading gradually into silence. The lantern's flame held steady, its glow unwavering. Minutes passed, tense and unbearable, until finally the oppressive presence lifted completely. Exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. I sank to the floor, drained and trembling uncontrollably. My body felt hollow, utterly spent from the constant barrage of terror and stress. Yet beneath the crushing fatigue, a fierce sense of triumph flickered stubbornly. I had survived yet another test, another brutal attempt to break me. My adherence to the rules had proven once again to be my salvation. But the cost was growing higher each night, my resilience frayed dangerously thin. As dawn broke faintly through the windows, I rose shakily, examining the lantern carefully. Its flame burned brightly now, steady and reassuring. Yet I knew how fragile that protection truly was. A mere flicker stood between me and unimaginable horrors. Stepping onto the observation deck, I breathed deeply, the morning air crisp and cold. Silver Peak stretched out silently, deceptively peaceful beneath the pale light. But I knew better now. The tranquility was superficial, masking the dark truths that haunted these woods. Returning to the cabin, I logged yet another night survived. Each tally felt like a small victory, hard won through fear and determination. But a grim realization nagged persistently at the edges of my consciousness. Survival wasn't simply about enduring physical threats. It was also about resisting the relentless psychological warfare designed to break my spirit. The lantern's fragile light had held back the darkness for one more night. But how long could it truly protect me? I shivered at the thought, resolve hardening stubbornly within me. Each night, each test of endurance only strengthened my determination. No matter how relentless the assault, I would cling fiercely to survival, one agonizing night at a time. The 8th day arrived with a sky as white as bone, casting a sterile, cold light over the lookout tower. The forest below looked still, unnaturally so, as if all life had withdrawn into hiding. Even the wind seemed cautious, brushing past the tower with uneasy restraint. My reflection in the cracked mirror looked gaunter, thinner than the day before. The ordeal was stripping me down piece by piece. I moved through the morning in silence, skipping breakfast. My appetite had withered to nothing, replaced by a tight knot of anticipation that refused to unwind. I kept glancing at the corner of the cabin where the spare chair sat, plain, wooden, and utterly untouched since the day I arrived. Rule 10. The spare chair is not for you. Don't sit in it. Until now, it had been easy to ignore. It wasn't particularly comfortable looking and sat awkwardly angled away from the desk, facing one of the windows like a forgotten guest. But today I couldn't stop looking at it. The chair was drawing me in. Around noon I tried to distract myself with the binoculars, safe during daylight, and scanned the woods for signs of fire or movement. Nothing. The forest was frozen in place. The chair remained in my peripheral vision, a silent dare. I turned away from it, pulled the logbook toward me, and began updating notes. As I wrote, I noticed something. The chair had moved. It was subtle, but its legs had shifted, now angled slightly more toward the desk. I stood quickly, heart jumping into my throat. My hands hovered above the logbook, frozen. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even gone near it. Yet there it sat, different. I backed away slowly, refusing to turn my back to it. The cabin was quiet except for the creaking of the old wood under my feet. The silence stretched tight, taut with tension. Then the lantern flickered. A small, almost imperceptible breeze brushed past me. I turned sharply to look at the windows. No signs of opening or drafts. When I turned back, the chair had moved again. Closer now, barely a foot from its original position. I felt it then, like a breath against the back of my neck. Not wind, not weather, presence. I pressed myself against the far wall, eyes locked on the chair. My instincts screamed to run, to do something, anything. But the rules held me firm. I couldn't sit, I couldn't acknowledge. The rest of the daylight was spent in tense silence. I didn't eat, I didn't speak, I barely moved. As 7 p.m. neared, I went about the evening routine with a mechanical urgency. Locking the trapdoor, checking the lantern, turning off the electronics. When I turned back to the center of the cabin, the chair had returned to its original place. I didn't question it. I didn't want to know how or why. I simply stared at it, throat dry, the air in the cabin so still it hurt to breathe. Night crept in slowly, inching across the cabin like spilled ink. Shadows pooled in corners and pressed against the glass from outside. The lantern's glow cast strange, elongated silhouettes across the walls, and the chair stood out like an anchor in the storm. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. I thought the worst might have passed until the air shifted again. I didn't hear the trapdoor move. I didn't need to. I felt it. The wrongness. Something was inside. I sat rigid in my chair, not the spare one, clutching the rule sheet with white-knuckled fingers. My breath shallow, my pulse a thunderous rhythm. A quiet scuffing sound echoed from behind me, the unmistakable noise of wood dragging across wood. The spare chair had moved again. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. It was behind me. A weight settled into the air, a pressure as if the cabin had suddenly dropped in elevation. My ears rang and my vision blurred. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there, muscles locked, waiting. The lantern flickered once, twice, but held. Whatever was in the chair made no sound, but its presence pressed hard against my back like ice through a doorframe. I stayed like that until dawn, unmoving, unblinking, barely breathing. When the first light crept through the clouds, the pressure lifted. The chair was empty again. It hadn't moved. Or maybe it had moved back. I didn't care. I rose slowly, legs trembling, and stepped outside to vomit over the railing. Another night survived. Barely. When I returned to the cabin, I didn't look at the chair. I refused. Some lines couldn't be crossed, not even with a glance. I logged the night's events without details. I just wrote, "The chair moved, I didn't," and for now, that would have to be enough. The 9th day brought a stillness so deep it felt deliberate. The forest no longer whispered, it held its breath. I remained inside, too weary and rattled from the chair's visit to risk stepping onto the deck. Everything about the tower seemed subtly different, as if something had shifted during the night. The walls groaned louder, the floor creaked where it hadn't before. Even the light from the lantern seemed weaker, dimmer, as if fighting against something I couldn't see. Midday passed without event, but my nerves were wound too tight to relax. I caught myself flinching at every sound. It was a waiting game now. I didn't know what for, but I could feel it coming. Night arrived, like a predator. I locked the trapdoor and turned off every device, letting the lantern cast its protective glow. The silence stretched on endlessly. I sat at the desk with the rule sheet beside me, trying to focus on anything but the shadows dancing at the edges of my vision. Then I heard it. My name, whispered, barely audible, like breath across my ear. I froze. "Sarah." The voice came again, my own name repeated with slow, deliberate clarity. It was outside, just beyond the window. The rule screamed in my head, "Never acknowledge your own name if it's whispered from outside." I clenched my jaw and stared straight ahead. My fingers curled tightly around the arms of the chair, bloodless and rigid. "Sarah," it said again, this time softer, almost tender. A cruel mimicry. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My pulse thudded loud in my ears, drowning out everything else. For 15 minutes the whisper came again and again, patiently persistent. And then silence. Just like that, it was gone. The thing that had spoken, if it had ever been there, retreated. The air inside lightened fractionally, though the fear still sat heavy in my chest. I didn't sleep that night. I just waited for the sun to return. When it finally did, I scrawled in the logbook with a shaky hand. Something used my name. I didn't answer, and I wouldn't, not ever. Not even if it learned how to cry like my mother. The 10th day began with a warning. The ranger station's radio crackled to life just after breakfast with a transmission I wasn't expecting. "Lunar eclipse tonight," the voice said plainly. "Full red moon expected. Stay indoors and follow protocol." That was it. No follow-up, no questions asked. The voice didn't even identify itself. But my stomach dropped. I didn't need the rule sheet to know what that meant. Rule 11, cover the lookout windows if the moon turns red. I spent the entire day in preparation. I cut up old sheets, secured thick blankets over every window with duct tape, even pulled the maps off the wall to layer the glass. I made sure there wouldn't be a single sliver of light shining through. Not one glimpse of the sky, not one glimpse of the moon. Still, the unease built steadily. I ate mechanically, stomach knotted, and walked the perimeter of the deck in tight, anxious circles. The forest was still again, as if holding its breath for something. When dusk rolled in, it painted the trees in deep oranges and violent reds. The color seemed off, exaggerated, like the world itself was being dipped in blood. I triple-checked the trapdoor lock, refueled the lantern, shut off every piece of electronic equipment. Then I sat in the center of the cabin, surrounded by thick cloth and wood, and waited. It wasn't long before the light changed. Even with the windows covered, I could feel it, and a natural red pulse bleeding through the fabric. The cabin darkened in a way that didn't feel like nightfall. It felt like something had blotted out the stars. Then they came. At first it was subtle, a scrape on the roof, a tapping on the window, gentle like fingers. I squeezed my eyes shut and pulled the lantern closer, the flame flickering with unease, then a sound like breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing, as though something enormous circled the tower, panting with anticipation. I heard movement on the deck. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Then something began to whisper my name again. But this time it wasn't one voice. It was many, overlapping, some familiar, some not, some impossibly distorted like they were echoing up from a well. I didn't move. I didn't respond. The whispers rose into moans, into laughter, into screams. I sat there for hours, sweat pouring down my back, gripping the rule sheet like a lifeline. The lantern dimmed. I quickly refueled it, my hands slick with fear, and still, the sounds went on. Then, nothing, just silence. A long, aching silence that settled over the tower as the red light slowly faded. I peeled back one corner of a blanket to see the sky had returned to normal. A pale blue dawn creeping in. I survived. But something had been closer that night. Something that wanted me to look. I didn't. And maybe that's why I'm still here. The 11th day greeted me with a heavy stillness. After what had happened during the eclipse, I half expected the tower to be torn apart, or for something unspeakable to have made it inside. But everything was untouched, normal even. That made it worse. It made me wonder if they knew I'd survived. I ate a few bites of a granola bar, sipped coffee, and stared out over the valley. It was quiet, deceptively so. There were no signs of life, no bird song, no movement in the brush, not even the usual rustle of wind through the trees. The silence felt curated. That morning I hesitated before powering on the radio. I didn't trust it, not anymore. The voice that had warned about the eclipse hadn't identified itself, and something about the tone had scratched at my nerves. But I needed to check in. Skipping it might raise suspicions or, worse, invite another kind of attention. I keyed the mic and gave my standard response. Silver Peak lookout, clear skies, no activity. Static. Then a voice crackled through. Copy that, Silver Peak. Good to hear you're still with us. Still with us. The phrasing was odd. People at HQ never said things like that. I pressed the mic again, more cautious now. Roger, still here, holding steady. Another pause. Then, we'll send someone up with supplies soon. You've done well. I stared at the radio like it had grown teeth. No one had mentioned a supply run before. Carl had told me explicitly that resupply wouldn't happen unless there was a mechanical issue, and even then, I was to notify them first. Negative, I said, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. Supplies are adequate, no assistance required. Silence again. Then the voice returned, lower and slower. Are you sure, Sarah? My throat went dry. I hadn't said my name, not once. I never did over the radio. I shut it off. The hum of silence returned like a weight slamming into the room. I backed away from the console, every muscle in my body tense. I checked the rule sheet again. Rule 6, don't use your name over the radio. Ever. I hadn't, but someone, or something, had. Was it testing me, or was it just letting me know it was listening? I spent the rest of the day watching the trail that led up the mountain, watching for a ranger who might be a stranger, or a stranger pretending to be a ranger. No one came. As night fell, I locked the trapdoor, turned down the lights, and lit the lantern. Then I moved the radio into a locked drawer and stacked 3 books on top of it. Whatever was on the other end didn't need to know I was listening, and I didn't need to know what it sounded like when it came closer. Day 12 broke colder than the others, a frost crusting the edges of the window panes. I woke from a restless sleep, heart pounding from a dream I couldn't remember, only that I'd heard a voice. No, voices, chanting my name in unison. When I stepped out onto the deck, the forest looked different. The trees stood too still, like statues waiting for a cue. No wind, no birds, no movement, just the sharp sting of cold air against my cheeks. I skipped breakfast. The knot in my stomach wasn't going anywhere, and I didn't want to risk letting my guard down. Just before noon, I heard something new. The radio, long since unplugged and stashed in the locked drawer, began to hum. Not static, not signal, a low hum, like a song without melody. I stood frozen, staring at the drawer. The radio wasn't plugged in. No power. Nothing should be coming from it. The hum grew louder, higher. I yanked open the drawer and, heart racing, tore the batteries from the device. The hum stopped. Dead. I backed away and sat on the cot, holding the batteries like they might bite me. 15 minutes later, the emergency channel crackled to life through the backup speaker overhead. Responding to missing persons alert. Last seen, mile marker 42 near the Switchback Trail. Hiker presumed lost. Repeat, hiker presumed lost. A map hung to the left of the observation deck. I leapt to it. Mile marker 42 was only a mile or two downhill from the tower, too close. I grabbed the binoculars, still safe during daylight, and scanned the trail. And I saw it. A red jacket. Bright against the gray-green of the forest. A person barely visible, staggering through the underbrush. I should have called it in, should have grabbed the radio. But I hesitated, and that hesitation might have saved my life. The figure in red paused. Then it looked up. From over a mile away, it looked directly at me. Not the tower, me. Through the lenses of my binoculars, its face was oddly soft, undefined, the eyes too wide, the mouth too still. Then it raised a hand and waved. My stomach dropped. Rule 4, don't acknowledge any figure in the forest if it waves. I dropped the binoculars and stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. By the time I got back up and peered over the railing, the red jacket was gone. No footprints, no trace. Later that evening, I fought the urge to turn the radio back on and report what I saw. It might have been a real person. It might still be. But I knew what the rules meant now. I knew what happened when you gave the forest an opening, and I couldn't afford to open any more doors. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat beside the trapdoor, lantern lit, shotgun across my knees. Whatever was out there knew I was watching, and now I knew it was watching back. The 13th morning came with a dense fog that clung to the forest like a living thing. Tendrils of mist curled between the branches, drifting up the mountain like pale fingers. From the deck, the world looked like it had been erased. Trees faded into whiteness only a few yards out. It wasn't just a visual effect. The silence had weight. There were no birds, no insects, no signs of life. Even the wind had stopped breathing. I stayed inside longer than usual, pacing the floor like a caged animal. The rules didn't say anything about fog, but I trusted my instincts by now, and they were screaming. I ate a few bites of oatmeal and tried to focus on my logbook, but my eyes kept drifting to the binoculars resting on the shelf. I'd avoided them since the red jacket, but something about the fog compelled me. It was the kind of silence that hides things. Around 4 p.m., the fog began to thin just slightly. Slashes of light cut through in scattered beams, and the edges of trees started to emerge like ghosts. I stepped onto the deck, the air damp and cold against my skin. I reached for the binoculars. The rule was specific: don't use them after sunset, and sunset wasn't here yet. My hand hovered over them. Just one quick scan, I told myself. One check. I raised the lenses and swept the tree line. At first, nothing. Then I saw them, figures, dozens of them. They stood in the clearing near the switchback trail, completely still. Their bodies were oddly proportioned, some too tall, some too wide, others bent at impossible angles. They weren't moving, not walking, not swaying, just standing, watching. And then they all turned at once, toward me. My heart seized. I yanked the binoculars down and stumbled back, gasping. A sick wave of dread slammed into my gut. I rushed inside, dropped the binoculars to the floor, and closed every curtain. The rule hadn't been broken. Not technically, but I'd gotten too close. That night, I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't write in the log. I sat by the lantern with my hands clenched in my lap, praying the figures weren't still out there, praying I hadn't invited something in by seeing too much. Just before midnight, a knock came at the door. 3 gentle taps. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Another knock. This one louder. Then silence. And from outside, "Let us in." The voice didn't sound like anything human. Not quite. It sounded like someone had learned how to speak from an old recording, slightly off, hollow. I gripped the shotgun tighter. "We saw you," the voice said next. And then it was gone. I stayed in that chair until sunrise. When light finally poured through the cracks, I peeled back a curtain. The fog had lifted. The forest had returned. But the binoculars lay on the floor where I dropped them, the lenses shattered. I didn't remember breaking them. I logged the night with a simple phrase. I looked, they looked back. The morning after the knock was brittle with silence. Even the frost seemed hesitant to cling to the tower's windows, like it, too, didn't want to linger here. I moved slowly, stiff from hours spent motionless with the shotgun across my lap, my muscles sore, my mind fractured by the weight of what I'd heard, what I hadn't dared to answer. I didn't touch the binoculars. I didn't even look at them. Instead, I cleaned, scrubbed the counters, sorted my dwindling supplies, wiped down the lantern until it gleamed like a sacred artifact. I needed the illusion of control, needed to do something with my hands. That's when I remembered the drawer beneath the desk. I'd checked it once early in my stay, found only a few old pens and a broken compass. But now, desperate for any distraction, I pulled it open again, deeper this time. My fingers touched something at the very back, a small stack of yellowed paper. Logs, shift logs, not the ones I was instructed to keep. These were older, fragile, pages curled with time and neglect. I pulled them out and began to read. The first was dated 15 years ago. The handwriting was tight, precise, the entries mundane, weather notes, bird sightings, fire risk assessments. Then 2 weeks in, heard something under the tower last night, trapdoor was locked, didn't open it, good thing, it was still rattling at 3 a.m. My breath hitched. I flipped to the next few pages, now less precise, the pen strokes shakier. Figures in the woods today waved at me, didn't wave back. One of them smiled. Another entry, radioed HQ. They asked for my name. I didn't give it. Next hour someone knocked and said my name in my own voice. Didn't open. The entries became shorter after that, more erratic. Moon turned red, covered the windows, heard laughing. Chair moved again, still empty, still not sitting in it. Something in the forest is pretending to be people. They don't get tired, but I do. And the final entry in hurried, nearly illegible scrawl, burn it all, don't leave anything behind, not even your name. I set the pages down slowly, my hands trembling. Someone else had followed the rules, had seen what I was seeing, had fought to survive, and still hadn't made it out. I looked around the cabin, suddenly hyper-aware of everything I'd brought. My clothes, my journal, my extra gear, my scent. I understood now why the last rule was there. Rule 12. Burn your shift logs and don't leave any personal belongings before leaving the tower for good, because if you did, if you left a piece of yourself behind, they'd have something to follow, something to find you with. That night I lit the fireplace for the first time, not for warmth, but for preparation. I laid the old logs gently into the flames, watching the ink darken and curl into ash. I didn't cry. I didn't look away. The fire crackled louder than it should have. I went to bed with the door latched and the lantern burning, and dreamed of someone whispering my name from inside the fire. The 15th day was different. It started with a noise beneath the floor, soft, slow scratching like a nail being dragged in lazy circles on wood. It began at sunrise and didn't stop. I tried to ignore it, tried to distract myself with routine, but no task could drown out the low, persistent sound that echoed through the hollow beneath the floorboards. The trapdoor, per the rules, stayed locked. By noon, the scratching evolved into something more rhythmic. Not quite knocking, not quite footsteps. A deliberate pace, like something pacing a small space beneath me. The hairs on my arm stood up. I sat on the floor and pressed my ear against the wood. I expected silence, maybe an animal. Instead, I heard breathing. Deep, calm, measured, not frantic, not animalistic, controlled. It knew I was listening. I stood quickly, my heart pounding, and put the logbook aside. I didn't want any record of this moment. The rest of the day passed with agonizing slowness. The sound below never stopped, never intensified. It just remained. A quiet, constant reminder that I was no longer alone. As the sun began to fall, I moved through my routine with trembling hands. I locked the trapdoor early, reinforced it with my bed frame and a box of canned goods. The lantern was fueled and burning bright. The curtains were shut tight. Everything that could be locked or covered was. I skipped dinner. My appetite was gone. By 8 p.m., the scratching stopped. The silence was worse. It pressed in from all sides, unnatural in its completeness. The kind of silence that seems to listen. Then from the trap door came a voice, not just a whisper, a voice, clear, confident. Sarah, open the door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I'm cold. Let me in. It sounded like my father. The voice, the tone. Everything about it was perfect. Except for one thing. My father had been dead for 7 years. I brought your coat, the one you forgot at Christmas. Remember, I promised I'd keep it safe. My body trembled violently. I knew better. I knew the rule. The trapdoor must stay locked. But the voice kept speaking, weaving stories only I would know. Childhood memories, specific phrases, things I had never told anyone. It knew me. It was me. The voice changed then, shifted mid-sentence. You can't hide forever, it said in my own voice. You think they don't already know? You think the rules will save you? They wrote them. They just want to see if you'll break them. I backed away from the door, retreating to the far corner of the cabin. My shotgun lay across my lap, but I didn't think it would help. At midnight, the voice stopped. Then the pounding began. Violent, repeated. Each strike against the trap door felt like a battering ram. The lantern flickered with every blow. Dust rained from the rafters. My ears rang, my skull throbbed with each impact. And through it all I sat still. I didn't respond. I didn't look. I didn't speak. Finally, around 3 a.m., the pounding ceased. In its place, dragging. The sound of something heavy pulling itself down the stairs and into the forest. The rest of the night passed without another sound. When the sun rose, I found the trapdoor intact, though the wood around the hinges was splintered. On the floor beneath it, a coat lay folded. My coat, the one I had lost years ago. I didn't touch it. I burned it in the fireplace. Then I sat down and added a new line to the rule sheet. If it speaks with the voice of someone you love, it is lying. Day 16. I barely recognized myself anymore. The woman staring back at me in the mirror above the sink had hollow cheeks and sleepless eyes. Her lips were chapped, her fingers blistered from gripping the shotgun. Her voice, when she used it, cracked and rasped like dry leaves, and her hair, unwashed, tangled, streaked with ash, looked more animal than human. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was enduring. After the coat incident, I didn't open the trap door all day, not for air, not to check the supports, not to confirm it hadn't splintered through overnight. I left it sealed like the tomb it tried to become. I spent the morning sharpening my hatchet, every strike a ward against madness. Afterward, I restocked the lantern and organized my food stores. Counting down the remaining meals, I had enough for 2 weeks, 3 if I rationed hard. By mid-afternoon I felt it, that shift in the air. It started with a scent, faint at first, a sharp metallic tang, not smoke, not blood, but something primal, like ozone and rot. The hairs on my arms prickled. I checked every window, every corner, every board for breaches. Everything was sealed, and yet I wasn't alone. I turned slowly. The spare chair had moved again, not by much, but just enough to make its presence known. This time, though, it faced me, dead center, perfectly aligned, waiting. The rule said not to sit in it. It didn't say anything about it sitting in me. I stared at the chair for nearly an hour. Eventually, I turned it to the wall. It turned back when I wasn't looking. That night, I lit every lantern I had. I set them in a ring around the room, a small circle of flame to keep the dark at bay. I sat in the center, shotgun across my knees, and tried not to blink. Every creak of the walls made my breath catch. Every shift of wind against the windows made me flinch. But nothing came, not footsteps, not voices, not knocks. Instead, the silence deepened, not peaceful silence, sentient silence. I spoke to it. Just one word, "Why?" And the air answered, not with sound, with presence. I felt it in my lungs, in my pulse, in the tension behind my eyes. Pressure, weight, notice. It didn't speak, but it didn't have to. The message was clear, because you're still here. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have, because I dreamed. I stood in the forest, barefoot, my lantern in hand. The trees bent toward me. The sky above was black, not with clouds, but with movement. Thousands of eyes blinking in unison. And behind me, the tower burned, not with fire, with light. A cold, white glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. I turned to run, but I had no feet, only roots. When I woke, the lanterns were out, all of them. The room was cold, not from wind, from something deeper. I lit one lantern, then another, then all of them. Each wick caught after a hesitation, like the flame was reluctant to come back. I checked the chair. It was gone. I didn't move for an hour, just sat there, staring at the spot it used to occupy. Eventually, I stood and turned toward the window. There were footprints in the frost outside, circling the tower, just one set. Mine. I hadn't gone outside. That morning, I scratched a second new rule onto the page. If something moves when it shouldn't, it's watching you, and if it stops, it's waiting. Day 17 opened with wind, the first in days. It howled down from the peaks and swept across the valley in low, mournful waves, rattling the tower's frame and keening through the shutter seams like the sound of a distant animal in mourning. And with the wind came the sense that something had shifted again. The chair never returned, not physically, but I still felt it. I spent most of the morning pacing the cabin. The trapdoor remained shut, the windows covered. I didn't touch the radio. I hadn't since the voice said my name uninvited. I thought maybe if I ignored it long enough, the presence that mimicked me would move on. I knew better, but I still hoped. Sometime around noon, the silence broke. The emergency speaker clicked on by itself, static. Then, "Sarah, this is Carl. Do you copy?" My stomach turned to stone. Carl, the only real person I knew here. The ranger who gave me the rules. I hadn't heard his voice in over 2 weeks. "Sarah, if you can hear this, you need to answer. I'm coming up to the tower. I need to know you're all right." I hovered over the microphone, hand trembling above the button. Everything inside me screamed to respond. It was Carl. He was coming. He could get me out. Then I remembered the rule. Don't use your name over the radio. I didn't. "Silver Peak Lookout," I said, voice brittle, rehearsed. "Tower is secure, no assistance required." Silence. Then after a beat too long, "Copy that, Sarah." Wrong, too smooth. Carl had always called me Rookie. I turned off the radio immediately, heart hammering in my chest. I took a few steps back, nearly tripping over a lantern. The speaker crackled again, this time without the power light on. "It's all right, Sarah. We understand. You're scared. You're tired. But you don't have to be." The voice was calm, even. It could have passed for human if I didn't know better. "Just say your name, just once. That's all it takes. Then we can help." I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. The voice waited. When it spoke again, it was closer. The speaker wasn't lit, but the words were loud, clear, like they were inside the tower. "Sarah, you've already broken some rules." I backed toward the trapdoor, resisting the urge to bolt. I whispered a string of words I hadn't said since I was a child. Not prayers, just names. My name, my parents, my dog. Things that tethered me to a real world, a world where voices didn't slither through wires without electricity. The voice grew quieter, then vanished. The next morning, I opened the emergency drawer. I took out the flare gun and one flare. Not to signal for help, to burn the radio. It took an hour for the plastic casing to stop smoldering. The flames curled into strange shapes before they died, almost like mouths. I added a third personal rule below the others. If they speak to you through a machine, they've already found the wires inside you. The 18th morning came with color. Not the warm amber of sunrise or the hopeful blue of midday skies, but red, deep, angry red that painted the horizon like a wound. I stood on the observation deck wrapped in a blanket and watched the color bleed through the forest. It didn't feel like morning, it felt like warning. I knew what it meant. There would be another eclipse. The logs had mentioned it, those frantic scrawls in the margins. If the moon turns red twice, you're running out of time. That whole day felt wrong. The sun never fully broke through the clouds. The wind didn't howl, but whispered, dry, rasping movements through the trees that sounded almost like words. I didn't go outside again. I spent the afternoon preparing, more thoroughly than ever. I nailed the trap door shut from the top. I covered the windows again, this time with every spare cloth, towel, and coat I had. Even my sleeping bag. I poured the last of the fuel into the lantern. Then I did something I had never done before. I turned the rule sheet over and wrote a plan. Not just a rule or a log entry, a full plan. If I don't make it through tonight, 1, burn the journal. 2, burn the cabin if you can. 3, never speak your name. 4, never answer the radio. 5, don't follow the lights. 6, don't trust your memories. They can be used. This place learns you. That's how it hunts. I folded the paper and placed it under the lantern. As night fell, I sat in the center of the room with every light burning. I held the shotgun in one hand and the flare gun in the other. The shadows pressed against the blankets over the windows. And then, as if a switch had flipped, the light changed. It seeped in through the cracks, impossibly red, impossibly bright. The color of blood and coals and endings. The silence didn't last long. Something began to circle the tower. Not footsteps, not claws, something heavier, like wet rope being dragged across the wood. Then the sounds started. Voices, hundreds of them, all whispering my name in unison. They spoke my thoughts. They answered questions I hadn't asked aloud. They recited memories I hadn't shared. Childhood bedrooms, first crushes, my dog's name, my mother's last words. And then they started offering things. You want peace, Sarah. You want rest. You could go home. Just let us in. You've done so well. We'll carry the rules now. I covered my ears, screamed, fired a shot into the floorboards. The sound didn't even dent their chorus. Then came the knock at the trap door, gentle, rhythmic. I whispered every rule I knew like a prayer, every line I'd memorized, every strange instruction I'd followed. Then the floor beneath me creaked. Something was inside. Not a figure, a shape, a wrongness, a distortion in the air itself. It moved like liquid shadow and burned like ozone in my nostrils. It didn't speak, it listened. I pointed the flare gun and pulled the trigger. The tower exploded in red light and smoke. The shape writhed back, screaming with a dozen mouths that weren't mouths. I ran. Out the door, down the stairs into the forest. Branches clawed at my arms, shadows reached for my ankles. But I didn't stop. The tower burned behind me, not from fire, from light, cold white light. I made it to the river, collapsed in the mud, cried. When I looked back, the tower was gone. Just smoke, just ash. But the rules remained, etched into my memory like scars. I don't know how long I lay by the river. My hands were raw, my knees scraped, my eyes burned from smoke and from crying. But I was alive. That thought circled in my head like a fragile flame trying to keep the cold out. Alive, alive, alive. The sun rose, but it felt wrong, pale and thin, like it had traveled too far to get here. The forest steamed around me as if it too had sweated through the night. Ash still floated in the air, though there was no wind. I thought about walking back up the mountain. Maybe I could see if anything was left of the tower. But something told me no, something deep and old. That place was no longer a tower. It had been claimed. I followed the river until it curved through a clearing I didn't recognize. I had walked these woods in the daylight before. I knew every trail, every tree. But this wasn't on any map. And then I saw the structure. Another tower, identical, a perfect replica. Down to the buckled railing and the sloped roof, fresh wood, new metal, a sign out front, Silver Peak Lookout, rebuilt, restaffed. Rebuilt? In a day, no tracks, no equipment, no sounds of hammers, just a tower, waiting. I approached slowly. I didn't want to go in, but I had to. Had to know if the rules were inside. Had to know if this was some test, some trap, It was unlocked. The interior was identical, everything in its place, cot, desk, chair. And there on the table was a laminated rule sheet, fresh, untouched, 12 rules, same as before. I backed out, carefully, eyes on the sheet, eyes on the chair. Then I ran. I made it down to the ranger station by sundown. The drive to town was a blur. I told them there was a fire, that I barely made it out. They nodded, filed a report. No one asked about the rules. No one mentioned the replacement tower. When I checked the park's website that night from my motel room, there it was. Silver Peak Fire Lookout, fully operational, new listing, hiring volunteers. It even had a photo. There I was, in the tower's window, face pale, lantern glowing beside me, except I had never taken that picture, and I had burned that lantern. The next morning the website was gone. I booked a flight out of state, didn't tell anyone where, left no trace. Burned the journal in a trash bin behind the bus station, tossed the flare gun in a river halfway across the country. But it wasn't over. Every full moon I hear the wind howl in a familiar voice. Sometimes I find folded pieces of paper slipped beneath my door. 12 rules, always the same. Sometimes there's a 13th, and I don't read it, I just burn it. I moved 3 times in the first year, different cities, different names, no paper trail. I paid in cash, kept my phone off unless I had to make a call, never stayed anywhere more than a month. I got good at being invisible. But the rules followed. They didn't come all at once. At first it was just a dream, a lantern flickering in the dark, a knock beneath the floor, a voice whispering my name in the tone of someone I'd forgotten. Then I started seeing them again, those lights in the trees, in places that had no trees, in alleyways, on highways, in reflections. The 13th rule was never the same. One note told me to never walk through doorways twice. Another told me that the 4th person I saw on a Tuesday would lie to me. One, scrawled on napkin paper and slipped into my pocket at a grocery store, just said, "It doesn't end." I burned them all, every time. But that last one, it stuck in my mind, because I'd started to believe it. I kept telling myself I'd survived, I'd followed the rules, I'd left the tower. But deep down I knew I hadn't left. Not really. It had come with me. Or maybe I'd been inside something much bigger than a lookout tower all along. The final straw came 13 months after I fled Silver Peak. I was renting a basement apartment in a quiet New England town. I kept to myself, worked odd jobs, avoided the internet. It had been weeks since the last note. I let myself believe maybe, just maybe, I was free. Then, one night, I woke up to find a folded sheet of paper resting on my chest, typed, laminated. Not 12 rules this time, not 13, just one. It read, "You've seen too much. You know how this works. You know what you have to do." I didn't wait. I packed only what I could burn. I drove until the gas light came on, parked behind a closed-down diner on the edge of nowhere. I doused the car, the bag, the clothes I'd worn from Silver Peak, even the fake ID I'd been using. I stood in the cold and watched it all burn. The fire crackled like laughter. I walked away with only the boots on my feet, the clothes on my back, and a disposable phone with one number stored. Carl's I didn't call, not yet. But I stared at that number a long time. Because there's one last rule I've never written down, one I learned too late to save myself, but maybe not too late to save someone else. It's the rule that lives in the silence after the 12th knock, the rule you don't hear until you've survived the rest. You don't get to leave, you only pass it on. So maybe I'll call Carl, or maybe I'll leave a box on his porch, a flare gun, a lantern, a map to the trailhead, a fresh sheet of rules. Maybe someone else will volunteer. Someone brave or lonely or bored. Someone who thinks it's just a tower. And maybe they'll listen. Maybe they'll follow the rules, or maybe not. But I'll make sure they get their shot, because this isn't a story you finish, it's a fire you feed. And someone somewhere always thinks they're the one who'll put it out. Maybe they will succeed, where I failed.